Thank you. I think that's a great big picture. As someone who applied for many of those programs and was sometimes in the 60% that didn't make the cut, 60 out of the 80, it was nice to know that they were there, and we certainly did get into the mix as often as we could. So we actually have a Northwest Youth crew coming to work on our little 11-acre small woodland here this next month, piling and not burning, not running big chainsaws, but they're going to do what they can do and take the load off my husband and I. So moving on. We realized as we pulled together the agenda that we did not have a significant chunk of time devoted to air quality. And if anything touches the human environment and condition during wildfire, more than anything, if you're not actually in the fire, is the smoke. No matter where you are, it seems like in the state anymore, there's no escape, even if you go to the coast. I know, I've tried. So we pulled together a group of folks under Jim Markweise's direction with the EPA to spend some quality time talking about air quality and what we're learning in the monitoring. And I think we heard from Doug quite a few of the types of policy sorts of reactions we can have to that particular issue. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim to run this group of people. Help me welcome Jim, everybody.
Thanks, Cheryl, and thank you all for showing up. I'm very excited about this distinguished panel that's going to speak with us about what the state of Oregon's doing for air quality in regard to wildfire. And I really appreciate Aaron Borisenko in particular for saying we need more air talks in this huge symposium, and so we were happy to oblige. Thank you for the conference organizers for making the space for us to get up and talk about the exciting work we're doing. So I'm going to introduce each speaker coming up, but a quick overview. We'll first hear about after-action review of Forest Service smoke operations from Rick Graw with the USFS. And next, how did the community of Oak Ridge endure 37 days of unhealthy levels of smoke from the Cedar Creek fire? And that's with Steve Dietrich of El Rapa. After that, we'll hear about Oak Ridge community-focused after-action review, and that's Holly Smith and Heidi Huber-Stearns. Next, we'll hear about providing real-time air quality data at a scale for public health decisions making during wildfires, and that's with Tom Roik of DEQ and Carol Trenga of OHA. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with community wildfire resistance and the role of regional smoke research centers in understanding smoke impacts, and that's with Kyle Chapman and Cass Mosley. So let's give a round of applause for our distinguished speakers, and again, as they come up, I'll introduce each one in a little more detail, and then they'll give their presentation. We're going to be clipping through this fairly quickly. It's about 10 minutes for each group, and hopefully there's some time after. I'm not really holding my breath that there's going to be a ton of time for a panel discussion, but we'll entertain as many questions as we can. So thanks panel members. And if we can cue up Rick's talk. Is that up? Yep, great. So Rick Graw has been an air quality meteorologist for the past 36 years. For the past 16 years, he's been the air quality program manager for the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Northwest region, focusing on reducing the risk of smoke from wildland fires. Recently, Rick's research has been published in the International Journal of Wildland Fire on strategies to reduce smoke from wildland fires in southwestern Oregon. Rick, come on up.
Great. So how do I advance the slides? Is this push forward?
This, you can do that, okay. And then that's more the point.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just skip here as I only have 10 minutes. So I want to begin with this figure here on the left side of the screen, which is a summary of the number of days in each community that has a smoke monitor in which the air quality index exceeded the unhealthy for sensitive groups or worse rating. In working for the Pacific Northwest region, I look at all of Washington and Oregon here. And as previously mentioned, Oak Ridge was the community that was impacted the most frequently with 37 days, 9 of which were in the hazardous ranking. There are another area that was pretty hard hit by smoke was up in north central Washington with Wenatchee and Leavenworth. Had about 3 weeks of smoke up there. And on the west side there, over in Darrington, Washington, they had 18 days with unhealthy conditions as well. Some of the nice things that occurred this last year, Klamath Falls, one of the usually highly impacted communities, 0 cases of poor air quality during the wildfire season. The Rogue Basin only had about a week worth of smoke. Bend didn't too bad. And so why do I show you this? Well, what are we doing at the Forest Service? Well, during the wildfire season, we could look at these and understand about or after the wildfire season, I should say, understand which communities got impacted, which fires caused those impacts, how were those fires managed, were there any opportunities we missed in terms of reducing the smoke from those wildfires? What about were air resource advisors assigned to those fires to help the community understand when to expect smoke and how much smoke? And one of the lessons we learned up in Washington, up in northwestern Washington, we didn't have air quality advisors assigned to those fires throughout their duration. Many of them occurred in October. We had a big high-pressure system sitting us over the Pacific Northwest in October, and it really caused poor ventilation and really bad air quality. So that was one takeaway I have from this. But as we continue to look at this, we're going to look for opportunities. This next slide was prepared by an intern of mine, Claire Scholart, who's a PhD candidate with the University of Washington School of Public Health. And Claire and I have been working together to create a new way of looking at some of the air quality impacts. And the top figure on the top right of the figure there illustrates the air quality monitors overlaid on the social vulnerability index that's prepared by CDC. So this is a way of understanding communities at risk in the smoke impacts in those communities that help alert us to those issues and see what opportunities we have to make it a little bit easier for those folks on the landscape. Also, on the lower part of the figures, you'll see some different ways of displaying the air quality. And I want to point your attention to the figure on the lower right. This is something that I've been very interested in looking at, and that's what I call the cumulative smoke impacts in the community. And here you see it for Oak Ridge. And you can see as the curve really steepens, you're going to have a lot more smoke accumulating that people are exposed to. And I think this hopefully will drive some questions and some answers in terms of public health and what those long duration smoke impacts does to an individual. And as we make this information available on a clickable website where you could just click on a community and these graphs pop up, each one of you could kind of get a sense of what kind of smoke you've been exposed to and how your body responds to that. How long does it take to recover from that? Do you ever recover from that? So, new ways of looking at some existing problems. This is more to drive some questions than we have answers for, but I like it because it shows me what my body might be exposed to if in a community as I go through wildfire smoke season. It's also nice to prepare these graphs and compare them among different areas. It also helps us understand how much smoke a community's been exposed to during the season. And then when we think about doing prescribed burning in the fall, maybe we could get an objective stance at approach to understanding whether or not we want to risk putting any smoke in that community during prescribed burning during the fall or not. So this is another way of helping us with that. Another thing I've been working on is creating these frequent air pathways into communities during wildfire season. And what each of these kind of colorations that you're seeing there, they represent the frequency of the air movement into a given community during the wildfire season. So there's a color scale there. It goes from black to yellow, yellow being less frequent than the black. But what I want to point out here is I've overlaid the wildfires from this last year on top of this. And there's a couple key things I think that this type of information is helpful. When I get a fire start, on the landscape. I could plot it along with this information and get an idea whether or not we're going to have long-term impacts of smoke into a community looking at that. Well, that might drive some different health messaging along the line, and also might help us think about how we want to assign resources to fires. So if we know we're going to get long-term impacts into a community, maybe that's going to be of a concern to us. And maybe we could do something about that. Additionally, I think we could use this type of information in terms of planning our fuel treatments on the landscape. Because right now, if we were to put a fuel treatment in an area where we have along a frequent air pathway, when a wildfire does come along and intersects with that fuel treatment, we know the flames are going to drop from the canopy down to the surface. It allows us to more directly engage with the fire. We're going to get probably less smoke from that fire into that community. So this is an approach we could use as a consideration among many other risk considerations on the landscape in terms of reducing smoke in communities during wildfire season. And I did an analysis for southwestern Oregon, and it showed we could reduce air quality impacts by 40% into a community. That's significant. So I'm excited about this. And lastly, as we talk about how are we going to increase pace and scale prescribed burning as we bump into air quality standards and keeping communities safe, what I've been hearing mostly from people is that we have a risk trade-off. There's the risk from the wildfires, there's a risk from the smoke from the prescribed burning. Each of those has a probability associated with it, right? So here's a path forward that I'm thinking about here. One, if we could define how much prescribed burning is needed in a given locality, and let's say that number is like we need 50,000 acres accomplished, and we get the NEPA assigned, and let's say that NEPA has a shelf life of 10 years. So we've got 50,000 acres divided by 10, we got to go 5,000 acres a year on average. Then let's take the elements from the burn plan that describe the meteorological parameters to get the fire behavior we want. Let's query the nearest weather station and see how many opportunities we actually have to get that burning accomplished. Maybe that's 10 in a whole year. Well, if we take advantage of that, that means we got to do 500 acres at a shot. Is that really realistic or not? Well, if it is, let's proceed. If it's not, then it's our opportunity to collaborate. And I want to point out we're doing some great collaboration right now over in the West Bend project area with EPA, the state of Oregon, DEQ and ODF, as well as the Forest and Forest Service research. And I'm really excited about what we're seeing there and some of the collaboration. But if that fails and we cannot meet those, and we know that the risks from the wildfires are worse than the smoke, then I would propose we need to change the regulations. And that's not going to be an easy pill to swallow. That's a long uphill battle, but I think we need to make room in the regulations for allowing risk trade-off considerations, which currently don't exist. Thank you very much.